Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The sun had already begun to sink beyond the red mountains of Dorne, painting the sky in deep shades of amber and blood. From the high balcony of the water gardens, Prince Doran Martell watched the sea reflect those dying colors, the waves whispering secrets to the shore. The soft laughter of children echoed from the marble courtyards below, but the prince's eyes were far away, fixed upon the memory of his brother, Oberyn. It had been moons since word came from King's Landing, bearing the tale of the Red Viper's death. The details of shattered teeth and crushed skull were whispered even among the servants, like a curse they dared not speak aloud. Oberyn Martell, champion of Dorne, slain by Sir Gregor Clegane. And though Doran had received the news in silence, his knuckles had turned white upon the arm of his chair. Dorne wanted war. The banners of the Sun and Spear had been seen fluttering above angry crowds in the streets of Sunspear. Lords of the Marches whispered treason. Even the Sand Snakes, Oberyn's fierce daughters, had come to demand blood in the prince's hall. They had spoken of vengeance and justice, of fire and war. And through it all, Doran had listened, calm as still water, his eyes hooded with thought. He had promised nothing, but in secret, he had begun to move pieces upon a board no one else could see. That evening, as the twilight deepened, Areo Hotah came to him. The Norvoshi captain moved like a shadow despite his size, his long axe gleaming faintly in the candlelight. "My prince," he said softly, "a rider has come from Sunspear. He bears a sealed letter, marked with the lion of House Lannister." Doran's gaze did not waver. "Bring it." The letter arrived upon a silver tray. Its seal was golden wax, stamped with a lion rampant. Doran studied it for a long moment, his thick fingers resting gently upon the parchment. "From Casterly Rock?" he asked. "The writer claims it came from King's Landing itself," Hotah replied. At last, Doran broke the seal. He read in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he placed the parchment aside and looked to the sea once more. "So," he murmured, "the lions send their regards." "What does it say?" Hotah asked. "That the Lannisters wish peace," Doran said. "They offer a visit, an envoy, one who carries a proposal to bind our houses closer still." Hotah frowned. "After the prince's death, they mock us." "Perhaps," Doran replied softly. "Or perhaps they fear what Dorne might do." He rose then, wincing as pain gripped his gout-stricken legs. "Summon Nymeria Sand," he said. "She knows how to listen when others speak too loudly, and she knows when to strike." The next morning dawned pale and windless over Sunspear. Nymeria Sand arrived at the water gardens before the sun had reached its height. She was the second of Oberyn's daughters, dark-eyed, sharp-tongued, and beautiful as her namesake queen. She entered the prince's solar without bowing, for she never did, and fixed her uncle with a steady gaze. "You called for me?" she said. Doran smiled faintly. "I did." She moved closer, folding her arms. "If this is another lesson in patience, my prince, I warn you, I have little of it left." "Not patience," he said. "Purpose." That silenced her. He handed her the Lannister letter. "Read." Nymeria's eyes darted over the lines. "An envoy from King's Landing," she muttered. "Offering peace? After they crushed my father's skull? I would sooner believe a viper swearing friendship to a mouse." Doran's gaze sharpened. "And yet, we will hear what this envoy has to say. Quietly, you will accompany Ario Hota to Sunspear. Watch, listen, learn what game they play, and if there are whispers beneath the surface, I would have them brought to me." "You suspect a trap," she said. "I suspect many things," Doran replied, "but traps, when seen in time, may be turned upon those who set them." That night, Nymeria and Hota departed for Sunspear, their horses cutting through the dark like phantoms. The moon was thin, the desert air cool and sharp. As they rode, Nymeria thought of her father, the laughter in his voice, the fire in his eyes, and the promise of vengeance that now burned in her blood. When they reached Sunspear by dawn, the city was already stirring. Fishermen's bells rang along the harbor, and the scent of spiced wine and roasted olives filled the air. Yet beneath the hum of daily life, Nymeria felt tension, a storm waiting to break. The people still whispered Oberyn's name, still cursed the Lannisters. At the gates of the old palace, the Lannister envoy awaited, a young man, golden-haired and finely dressed, with the easy arrogance of his house. He bowed low. "My lady, Captain Hota, I am Sir Keevan's nephew, Sir Taran Lynette. I come bearing peace from King's Landing." "Peace," Nymeria said, studying him. A rare word from a lion's mouth. He smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but lions can learn restraint when the alternative is ruin." Hota said nothing, but his hand rested lightly upon the haft of his axe. And so the first stones were laid, not for peace, but for a conspiracy that would change the fate of Dorne. For in the shadows of Sunspear, others were already plotting. A whisper passed through the noble halls and across the taverns. "Doran Martell is weak. He hides behind his children while the blood of Dorne cries for war." And among those whispers, one voice rose above the rest, smooth, calm, and treacherous. "The time has come," it said, "to place a true ruler upon the Iron Throne, one the Dornish can follow." And thus began the Dornish conspiracy. The hall of the old palace was heavy with the scent of dust and heat. Sunlight spilled through carved screens of pale marble, scattering patterns across the floor where courtiers moved like cautious birds. Nymeria Sand stood beside Ario Hota as the Lannister envoy was led before the Dornish nobles, her eyes sharp as a falcon's. Prince Doran had not come to Sunspear. His illness was excuse enough. Instead, the prince's banner hung behind the high seat, a red sun pierced by a golden spear, its colors rich as blood and flame. Beneath it sat Ser Malario Toland of Ghost Hill, acting as the prince's voice. She smiled faintly as Ser Taran Lynette bowed before her. "My lady," the young knight said, "I come bearing words of friendship from King's Landing, and an offer that may heal the wound between our realms." Nymeria watched him closely. He was handsome, in the clean, polished way of Westerosi lords, his hair the color of coin, his smile easy and practiced, but she could see the calculation behind his eyes. "And what does the lion offer Dorne?" Malario asked. "Peace," he said, "and alliance. The crown acknowledges the pain suffered by your people and wishes no further bloodshed between us. To prove our goodwill, we propose that Princess Myrcella Baratheon, presently in your prince's care, be betrothed to Prince Trystane Martell. When she comes of age, they shall wed, binding our houses forever." A murmur ran through the gathered nobles. It was no new proposal. The match had been spoken of before Oberyn's death. But for the Lannisters to revive it now, so soon after the Red Viper's murder, seemed bold. "An interesting gesture," Malario said, though some might see it as insult rather than olive branch. Sir Taran's smile did not falter. "Sometimes peace must be rebuilt from the ashes of pain." Nymeria felt her jaw tighten. Ashes of pain, he said, as if her father's shattered skull were a small thing to be brushed aside. That evening, as the court dispersed and the envoy was escorted to his chambers, Nymeria and Hota withdrew to the prince's solar, a room thick with the scent of lemon oil and old parchment. "He speaks prettily," Nymeria said, "but his words are hollow. They mean to keep us docile while their lions feast in King's Landing." Hota stood by the window, gazing down at the harbor. "Perhaps, yet Prince Doran would have us listen before we judge. I've listened enough to know deceit when I hear it." She turned to the table, where a map of Dorne lay spread. The parchment was marked with tokens carved in wood: castles, strongholds, banners of lesser houses. "Do you see?" she murmured, tracing a finger along the coast. "Since my father's death, banners have gathered at God's Grace and Ironwood. They say Doran hesitates, that he will not avenge his brother. They whisper of rebellion." Hota's brow furrowed. "You have heard these whispers?" "I have heard more than whispers," she said. "There are lords who speak openly now of crowning Myrcella. They claim the girl has a stronger claim than Tommen, being the elder child, and that with her upon the throne, Dorne might rule beside her." Hota turned to her, eyes grave. "And who leads them?" "That," she said, "I mean to learn." The days that followed were filled with watchful tension. Sunspear seemed to breathe in silence, the heat pressing down like a held breath. Nymeria walked the shadowed courtyards, listening to servants and soldiers alike, learning which names were spoken with loyalty and which with doubt. It was in the cool shade of the tavern called the Saffron Widow that she first heard the name whispered. Lord Trevin Corgyle of Sandstone, an old vassal of House Martell, proud and cunning, his loyalty worn thin as sun-bleached cloth. "They say he meets with strangers in the night," a sailor told her, half drunk on strong wine. "Men who wear the colors of the crown, though they come not from King's Landing. He speaks of change, of a new age for Dorne." That same night, Nymeria sent word to Hota, and together they followed the trail. The moon hung low and red as they rode beyond the city walls, cloaked and silent. The desert wind whispered through the palms, carrying the scent of sand and stone. They reached a small villa near the coast, abandoned by the look of it, save for the faint flicker of light within. Through a crack in the shutters, Nymeria saw them. 3 men seated at a low table. One wore the sigil of House Corgyle upon his cloak. Another bore the golden lion of Lannister upon his ring. Between them, a chest of coin lay open, gold glinting in the candlelight. "Payment," murmured Hota. "Or a promise," she said. They listened as Lord Corgyle spoke. "The prince will never move. He fears too much, hides behind his children and his gardens. But if we crown Myrcella, if we place her as queen by Dornish right, then the realm must answer, and Dorne shall lead that answer." The Lannister knight nodded. "You shall have our backing. Quietly for now. The hand cannot risk open defiance of Tommen's reign, but gold and swords will come, should the girl be raised in truth." Nymeria's heart hammered. Treason, plotted in our own land. Hota's hand rested on his axe. "We should strike now." "No," she whispered. "Not yet. We must bring proof to the prince. Let the vipers reveal their nest before we crush it." They slipped away as the meeting ended, silent as ghosts among the dunes. By dawn, they had returned to the water gardens. Nymeria found Doran in his chamber, seated before the sea once more, a letter open upon his lap. He listened as she spoke, his face calm, his eyes heavy with thought. "So," he said when she finished, The snakes of sandstone coil close to the lion's paw. I had feared as much. "Command me, uncle," Nymeria said. "Give the word, and I will bring their heads." Doran shook his head. "No, too soon. If we strike now, we scatter the sand and lose the trail. Let them think us blind. Let them think their whispers go unheard. When the time comes, I shall have not one traitor's head, but all." His voice, quiet though it was, carried the weight of a storm. "Tell none of what you've seen," he said. "Not even your sisters. This game must be played with patience and precision." Nymeria bowed her head, though the fire in her blood resisted stillness. As she turned to go, Doran called softly, "Nym." She paused. "When the vipers strike," he said, "remember, some wounds are healed not with blood, but with memory. Do not forget why we endure." She met his gaze. "I will not forget, my prince." Outside, the sun rose over the desert, fierce and merciless. The day would bring more whispers, more masks, and more lies. And beneath it all, the sands of Dorne shifted, preparing to swallow the unwary whole. For 3 days, the sun blazed mercilessly over Sunspear. The heat shimmered upon the white towers and baked the streets until even the lizards hid beneath the stones. Yet within the old palace, shadows lengthened. Words once spoken in whispers now slipped through corridors like serpents. Nymeria Sand moved among the courtiers with the poise of a panther, her gold bangles silent, her eyes sharp. The prince had forbidden her to act, but he had not forbidden her to watch. And watch she did. Lord Corgyle had returned to his manse beyond the city, yet his influence lingered. She saw his banner at the harbor, where small ships came and went under cover of night. She noted a merchant from Old Town who arrived with fine silks and left with no cargo at all. She saw Lannister coin pass from gloved hand to gloved hand. Each fragment was a grain of sand, meaningless alone, but together they formed a dune, a slow, silent gathering of treachery. Areo Hotah was her shadow in these days, though he seldom spoke. He was a man of few words and fewer doubts. "The prince plays a dangerous game," he said one evening as they walked the battlements. The sea below was dark, the waves murmuring like distant drums. "Dangerous games are the only kind worth playing," Nymeria said. Hotah's eyes flicked toward the desert horizon, where the first stars trembled in the fading light. "Not all who play them win." She smiled faintly. "Then let us not lose." That night, she sent her own eyes into the city. Boys who knew the alleys better than any noble, serving girls who heard the talk of visiting lords, and 1 or 2 men whose loyalty was measured in coin rather than honor. From them came news of a meeting to be held deep in the cellars beneath Sunspear itself. It was said Lord Corgyle would attend, and others of name besides. When the hour came, Nymeria cloaked herself in a plain shawl, her face veiled like a common trader. Hotah followed at a distance, his great axe wrapped in linen. The moon was thin as a blade. They slipped through the quiet streets to a forgotten stair behind a tanner's shop, descending into the damp air below. Torches burned low along the corridor, and voices echoed from beyond a heavy door. "Too long we've waited," said one voice, hard and low. "Doran will never act. He sits in his gardens and lets the world pass him by." Another, younger. "Then we must act for him." "Not for him," said a third voice, cold as sand in shadow. "For Dorne." Nymeria pressed her ear against the door, heart beating fast. Through a narrow crack, she saw them. Lord Corgyle, as expected, and beside him, Lord Jourdain of the Tor, his hawk-nosed face drawn tight. But the third figure made her blood run cold. Tiene Sand, her own sister. Tiene sat at the table's end, her hair pale gold in the firelight, her eyes calm and bright as polished glass. She wore the simple blue of a septa, though there was little piety in her voice. "My uncle is no fool," she was saying, "but he has forgotten our blood. He believes patience will serve us, that time will bring justice. Yet while he waits, the Lannisters grow stronger. The world forgets the name Martell." Lord Corgyle nodded. "If Dorne will not rise, we shall raise it. The crown's strength is divided. Tommen is a boy, and his mother's grasp weakens. Myrcella is here. If she were queen, then Dorne would rule from the shadows." Tyne finished. "Yes, Myrcella's claim is sound, and the realm would follow if Dorne declared her rightful heir. Trystane would stand beside her, and peace would come. Peace by Dornish hand." Nymeria bit back a curse. Her sister's voice was sweet as honey, her words woven with reason, yet beneath them coiled treason. She turned to Hota and whispered, "We must end this." But the Norvoshi shook his head. "Not yet," the prince said to wait. She clenched her fists. Too much waiting. Within, Lord Jourdain rose. "The men of Ironwood have agreed to lend support," he said, "and others will follow once the girl is crowned. But we must move soon. If Doran learns, he already knows." The words froze the air. The door creaked open, and there stood Prince Doran himself, robed in deep orange silk, a staff of carved ivory in his hand. His face was pale with pain and resolve. The conspirators rose, startled. Tyene's expression flickered, but only for an instant. "My prince," she said softly, "you should not be here, and yet I am," Doran replied. "I have listened long enough to whispers. Now I would hear truth." Lord Corgyle stepped forward. "The truth, my prince, is that you have failed your people. Oberyn is dead, and you sit idle while his killers feast in King's Landing." Doran's voice was quiet, but each word struck like a hammer. "You mistake restraint for weakness, my lord. You think vengeance is a storm that can be summoned by shouting at the sky. But storms must be guided, or they destroy all in their path." Tyene's smile was faint, her tone gentle. "And so, we would guide it for you, uncle. Myrcella's coronation would unite the realm. Her marriage to Trystane would make us traitors," Doran said. "To the crown, to the realm, to ourselves. Do you think the Iron Throne would sit idle while Dorne raises its own queen?" Lord Jourdain's hand moved to his sword. "The throne fears Dorne's fire. It always has. And you would feed it more," Doran said wearily. "You would have us burn for pride." For a heartbeat, none spoke. Then Nymeria stepped from the shadows. Her sister's eyes widened. "Nym." "I heard every word," Nymeria said. "You shame our father's memory." Tiene's gaze softened, almost pitying. "Our father would not have knelt to fear. He would have struck." "Perhaps," said Nymeria, "but he struck in open sight, not from the dark like a thief." The silence stretched. Doran lifted his staff, and the sound of armored feet filled the corridor. Guards poured in, men of House Martell, loyal and ready. "Take them," the prince commanded. Lord Corgyle reached for his blade, but Areo Hota moved swifter. His axe cleaved the torchlight with a hiss, and the lord fell where he stood. The others yielded, their courage crumbling before Doran's gaze. Tyene alone did not resist. She bowed her head, serene. "You cannot cage the wind, uncle," she murmured. "It will rise again." "Then let it rise elsewhere," Doran said. He turned to his guards. "Confine her to the water gardens. She is my blood, and I will not have her harmed." When the hall was cleared, Doran leaned heavily on his staff. The strength seemed to drain from him, and Nymeria stepped forward to steady his arm. You knew, she said softly. You let it come to this. I had to see who would stand against me, he replied. Now I know. Outside, the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the stones. The sea glimmered faintly beyond the windows, endless and cold. Doran looked out upon it and whispered, My brother sought vengeance through fire. I shall seek it through patience. But make no mistake, Nym, the day of reckoning will come. And when it does, the lions will bleed. Nymeria watched him, her heart heavy with conflicting fire and loyalty. Behind her, the corridor still echoed with the sound of chains. The storm had not broken, but it had begun to gather. And though the sun rose bright above Dorne, a shadow had fallen across Sunspear, darker than any cloud. The morning after the arrests, Sunspear seemed to hold its breath. Word of Lord Corgyle's death spread faster than wind across the dunes, though no one dared speak his name above a whisper. The lords of Dorne were wary now, their tongues guarded, their courtyards silent. Even the children playing among the fountains at the water gardens seemed to sense the heaviness that hung upon the air. Prince Doran remained secluded within his solar. He met no envoys, heard no petitions, and granted no audience save one, Areo Hotah and Nymeria Sand. When they entered, they found him seated beside an open window, a parchment unrolled before him. The sea breeze lifted his robe, stirring the faint scent of salt and lemons. He looked older than he had a day before, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed. The lords think me weak, he said at last. Perhaps I am, but weakness is not always a failing, Nym. Sometimes it is armor, a mask one wears until the enemy grows bold enough to strike. Nymeria said nothing. She still felt the sting of seeing her sister bound in chains. Tiena's calm smile haunted her dreams. The plot has been broken, Hotah said. The traitors named. What remains to be done? Doran's gaze shifted to the parchment on the table. Much, he said. For every snake we crush, 2 more rise from the sand. There are others, men in the shadow of King's Landing who fed coin and counsel to our rebels, and they have not forgotten us. He turned to Nymeria. A raven came this morning from King's Landing. The hand of the king requests an audience with me, or one I trust. He writes that certain matters of state must be clarified, else the peace between our houses may falter. Nymeria's brow furrowed. The hand? Yes. Lord Tywin Lannister is dead. His son, the dwarf, fled the city after murdering him. The crown now rests in the hands of Cersei Lannister. Then the realm is ruled by madness, Nymeria said coldly. Just so, which makes her dangerous. If the queen learns of Corgyle's plot and believes Dorne complicit, her wrath will be swift. Dorne folded the parchment with slow, deliberate care. I will not go to King's Landing, but someone must, someone whose tongue is sharp enough to find truth beneath false smiles. Nymeria knew before he spoke the words that followed. You mean for me to go? Doran's eyes met hers. Yes, you will ride north at once. You will take a small retinue, no more than 24 men. Speak softly, smile often, and watch. There is something foul festering in the capital, and I would know what game the lions play. Hotah shifted uneasily. The city is a pit of vipers, my prince. Then we send a viper of our own, Dorne replied. That night, as the stars wheeled above the towers of Sunspear, Nymeria prepared for the road. She stood upon the balcony of her chambers, the wind in her hair, the scent of salt and sand upon the air. Her thoughts drifted to Tyenn, confined now within the water gardens, and to their father, dead in the capital to which she now rode. Father, she whispered into the wind, your daughters walk your path still. By dawn, the company rode north. Hotah remained behind, bound by duty to guard the prince. The road from Sunspear wound through red hills and parched plains, across lonely rivers and silver dunes. The sun was merciless, and the horizon shimmered with heat. But Nymeria rode as though the fire itself drove her onward. After a fortnight's ride, they reached the Prince's Pass, where the Dornish marches met the Reach. The castle of Nightsong stood upon a high bluff, its banners snapping in the wind. There they were met by Sir Garland Tyrell, the Knight of Brightwater, sent to escort them safely through the Reach. Sir Garland was courteous, his manner calm, his eyes steady. Yet Nymeria saw the caution in him, the unspoken knowledge that his house had once warred against hers. "The Queen welcomes your coming," he told her as they rode through the fertile lands of the Reach, "though the court is unsettled of late." "Unsettled?" Nymeria asked. He hesitated. "The Queen's council quarrels. Lord Mace seeks honors. The High Septon calls for piety, and the small council obeys none but the Queen's temper." Nymeria smiled faintly. "Then it will be like home." They reached King's Landing at dusk 3 days later. The city lay sprawled beneath a haze of smoke, its walls black with soot, its air thick with the stench of men and horses and the sea. Nymeria's men drew their scarves against the smell. The red keep loomed above, crimson stone catching the last light of the sun. There, beneath its towers, the fate of Dorne would once again be tested. A herald met them at the gates and led them through winding corridors to the Queen's Hall. Cersei Lannister sat upon the dais in a gown of green silk, her golden hair arranged like a crown. Her eyes were bright and cold as polished glass. "Lady Nymeria Sand of Dorne," the herald announced. Cersei smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "So the vipers send their prettiest fang." Nymeria bowed, her voice smooth. "Dorne sends peace, your grace. Nothing more." "Peace," said Cersei, "is a fragile thing. Your uncle should remember that." "I am sure he does," Nymeria said. "He remembers many things." The Queen studied her in silence. "You resemble your father," she said at last. "He, too, came to this city bearing smiles and poison beneath them." "My father bore truth," Nymeria replied softly, "and some truths burn." A faint murmur stirred among the courtiers, but Cersei only laughed. "You have his tongue as well, I see. Very well. You may rest in the keep while we speak further. The court shall dine together tomorrow eve. Perhaps we will find common ground before the wine runs out." As she turned to leave, Nymeria caught a whisper behind her, 2 men speaking low. "The girl comes from Sunspear itself," one said. "If she learns—" "Quiet, fool," hissed the other. "The Queen will handle it." Nymeria's eyes narrowed. The Lannisters played their game, as always, but she had learned from her uncle that the Game of Thrones was never won by rage, only by patience. That night, in her chamber overlooking Blackwater Bay, she sat alone with her thoughts. The moon was hidden behind clouds, the sea dark and restless. Somewhere in the depths of the keep, ravens croaked, restless on their perches. A knock came at her door. When she opened it, a servant handed her a folded note, sealed with black wax. No sigil, no name. Only 4 words written in a fine, slanting hand. "They mean to kill her." She stared at the parchment, her breath catching. "Her?" She read it again, her pulse quickening. "They mean to kill her." Myrcella, the girl who was both guest and hostage, the innocent pawn between lions and serpents. And suddenly, the pieces shifted in her mind. The envoy's false smile, the Queen's barbed courtesy, the whispers at court. The Lannisters did not fear Dorne's vengeance. They feared Myrcella's bloodline. If the girl were gone, no claim could be made. No Dornish rebellion could rise behind her name. Nymeria rose, the note trembling in her hand. The sands of Dorne were far away now, but she could almost hear her uncle's voice in the wind. Patience is a blade, Nym. Wait until it cuts clean. But time was running short. Outside her window, the bells of the city tolled midnight. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, dark and endless. And in the heart of the Red Keep, unseen hands were already moving against the Princess of Dorne. Night lay heavy upon King's Landing, and the Red Keep slept in uneasy silence. Torches flickered in the high corridors, their flames guttering in the sea wind that crept through the arrow slits. Beyond the walls, the city murmured like a restless beast. Drunkards shouting, dogs barking, waves crashing faintly against the rocks below. In her chamber overlooking the dark sweep of Blackwater Bay, Nymeria Sand did not sleep. The note lay before her on the table, its black seal broken, the 4 words seared into her thoughts. They mean to kill her. Myrcella Baratheon, the girl Dorne had sworn to protect, the golden thread that bound their fragile peace. If she died in King's Landing, the blame would fall squarely upon Dorne. War would rise like a sun of blood over the realm. Nymeria drew a slow breath, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. There was no time to send word to Prince Doran. She would have to move alone. At dawn, she left her chambers cloaked in plain gray, her face half-veiled. The courtiers who passed her in the corridors saw only another servant of the Southern Embassy. She followed the winding halls toward the Maiden Vault, where Myrcella was kept under guard. The Red Keep was a maze of stone and whispers. Every step echoed softly, every turn of a corner brought another pair of eyes. She had not forgotten her father's tales of this place, the hidden tunnels, the eyes that watched unseen, the knives that gleamed behind smiles. 2 gold cloaks stood at the entrance to the Maiden Vault. Their armor gleamed dully in the morning light, and their expressions were bored. "The princess is not receiving visitors," one said when Nymeria approached. "I am from Dorne," she replied, lowering her veil just enough to show her face. "The queen herself bade me attend to the princess's comfort." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. The Lannisters might be lions, but they feared the snakes of Dorne. At last, one stepped aside. "Be quick about it." Inside, the chamber was bright with morning sun. Myrcella sat beside the window, a book open in her lap. The girl looked up as Nymeria entered, surprise flickering across her pale, gentle face. "Lady Nymeria," she said, "I remember you from Sunspear. You rode with my uncle once to the Water Gardens." "You remember well?" Nymeria said softly, "and it seems I arrive in time." "In time for what?" Myrcella asked, puzzled. Nymeria studied her, a child on the cusp of womanhood, unaware of how fragile her world had become. "For breakfast?" she said at last, forcing a smile. "May I?" Myrcella's maid was laying out bread, cheese, and a small flagon of juice. When she turned to fetch a napkin, Nymeria caught sight of the small vial beside the tray, crystal, nearly invisible, filled with clear liquid. She moved before she thought. Her hand darted forward, snatching the vial from the tray just as the maid turned back. The woman froze. For a heartbeat, the two stared at one another. Then the maid lunged for the door. Nymeria's arm caught her by the wrist, twisting sharply. The vial shattered against the wall, its contents hissing as they ate into the plaster. Myrcella cried out. "Poison!" Nymeria said coldly. "Who sent you?" The maid's face contorted with fear. "The Queen's man!" she gasped. "Sir Osmond! He said He said the girl was to be spared no longer. He said it was mercy." "Mercy," Nymeria repeated, a Lannister word for murder. Before she could press further, the woman jerked free, slamming her head against the wall. By the time the guards burst in, she was dead, her own tongue bitten through. Nymeria turned to Myrcella, who stood trembling, pale as milk. "You must not stay here," she said. "You are not safe in this castle." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "But where can I go?" Nymeria hesitated. There was no easy answer. King's Landing was a nest of knives, and Cersei ruled every blade. Yet to stay was death. "You will come with me," she said. "There are still those in the city who owe Dorne their lives. We will find shelter until I can reach your uncle." They slipped from the chamber before the bodies could be discovered. Nymeria led her through the servants' passages, narrow stairwells reeking of mildew and oil. Twice they passed gold cloaks, but the guards were too sleepy, too sure of their own power to look closely. At last they reached the outer courtyard, where the city's smell rose thick and foul. A stable boy, bribed with a coin from Nymeria's purse, saddled 2 horses without question. They rode out through a postern gate as the bells of the Sept of Baelor began to ring. The streets of King's Landing sprawled before them, alleys choked with beggars, merchants crying their wares, the air thick with the stench of fish and sweat. Nymeria kept her veil low and her hand close to her dagger. Myrcella rode behind her, silent, her golden hair hidden beneath a hood. They crossed the river gate by midday, following the narrow lanes toward Flea Bottom. Here, the city changed. Streets shrinking to gutters, windows shuttered, the people's eyes hard with hunger. Nymeria knew of a safe house once used by her father's spies during his time in the capital, a cellar beneath a ruined sept near the edge of the Hook. They found it by dusk. Inside it was cool and dark, lit only by the faint glow of a brazier. Myrcella sank to the floor, shaking. "Will the queen come for us?" she whispered. "Yes," Nymeria said honestly, "but we will not be here when she does." She knelt beside the girl. "Listen to me, princess. There are men in this city who will kill you to keep their thrones. There are others who would kill you to take them, but you are still of royal blood. That gives you power, if you are brave enough to use it." Myrcella lifted her gaze. "I never wanted to be queen." "Few who wear crowns do," Nymeria said softly. "But fate seldom asks what we want." They stayed the night in the cellar. Outside, the city rumbled. Cartwheels, shouts, the endless song of the bay. Sleep did not come easily. Nymeria sat by the brazier, the dagger in her lap, her thoughts circling like hawks. At dawn, the door creaked. She was on her feet in an instant, blade drawn. But it was not a Lannister soldier who entered. It was a man cloaked in black and crimson, his face half hidden by a hood. He moved with the careful grace of one accustomed to danger. When he spoke, his voice was low, measured, and familiar. "Peace, Lady of Dorne," he said. "I mean no harm." "Show your face," Nymeria commanded. He lifted his hood. Dark eyes met hers, a Dornishman's eyes, sunburned and weary. "Sir Daeron Corgyle," he said, "brother to the late Lord Trevin, I bring word from Sunspear." Nymeria's hand did not lower. "Your brother was a traitor," he nodded. "Aye, and he paid the price. But Dorne still bleeds from his folly, and I would see it healed. What word do you bring?" He drew a small scroll from his cloak and handed it to her. The seal was Doran's, amber wax stamped with the sun and spear. Nymeria broke it. The message was brief, written in the prince's careful hand. "The storm moves faster than we dreamed. Protect the girl. Trust no one, not even those who wear our colors. The lions are not alone in this." She looked up sharply. "What does he mean, not alone?" Darren's expression darkened. "It means, my lady, that the vipers you crushed in Dorne were not the last. There are those among your own kin who yet plot. Word reaches me that Tierney Sand was freed 3 nights past. Freed by order of a Dornish hand." Nymeria felt the blood drain from her face. Freed by whose hand? He hesitated. By Arianne Martell. The brazier crackled softly, the only sound in the dark. Myrcella stirred, still half asleep. Nymeria stared into the fire. "Then the game has begun anew," she said. "And this time, it is Dorne itself that plays against us." Outside, the first light of morning broke over the city's smoke-choked spires, painting them in pale gold. The bells tolled once more, and the sound carried far across the bay. Where the sea waited like a silent witness, the storm had come to King's Landing, and in its eye stood Nymeria Sand, her blade, her wits, and her vengeance her only shields. And somewhere beyond the horizon, her sister was already moving through the sands, free again, her smile as calm and deadly as ever. The snakes had scattered, but their fangs remained sharp. The dawn that rose over King's Landing was pale and cold, painting the bay in muted silver. Smoke hung low above the rooftops, mingling with the fog that rolled in from the sea. Nymeria Sand stood by the narrow window of the safe house, her cloak drawn tight against the chill, watching the first light creep over the city of lies. Darren Corgyle's words still echoed in her mind. Tiain freed by Arianne's order. It seemed impossible, yet she knew her cousin well enough to sense the shadow of truth in it. Arianne Martell was no fool. She loved Dorne fiercely, and she would not act without purpose. If she had released Tiaine, then the plot ran deeper than Doran's cautious patience could reach. Nymeria turned from the window. Myrcella still slept upon the cot, the faintest trace of innocence in her face. She was little more than a child, born into a world that would see her dead before she reached womanhood. "We cannot stay here," Nymeria said quietly. Darren nodded. "The Queen's men will be scouring the city by now. The maid's death cannot be hidden." Nymeria took up her dagger, tucking it into her belt. "Then we move before they find the trail." They left the cellar before sunrise, slipping into the narrow lanes where the fog veiled their passage. Myrcella rode pillion behind Darren on a borrowed horse, her hood drawn low, while Nymeria led the way through the sleeping streets. They crossed the Hook and made for the Street of Silk, where the brothels and wine sinks gave shelter to many who had reason to disappear. By midday, they reached the house of a woman known as the Lavender Widow, a matron whose husband had died fighting for Renly Baratheon, and who now kept her fortune in secrets rather than gold. She welcomed them with cautious courtesy, her sharp eyes weighing every gesture. "You bring danger with you, Lady of Dorne," she said as she poured wine into chipped cups. "But I've weathered worse storms. I will pay for silence," Nymeria said. The widow smiled. "Silence is dearer than coin, yet for now, we'll see what friendship buys." That night, Nymeria sat in the upper room, candlelight dancing over the map spread before her. The Red Keep loomed at the city's heart like a viper's nest, while beyond its walls stretched a maze of power. The Sept of Baelor, the Great Sept, the Street of Steel where the armorers whispered rumors between hammer strikes. She had come seeking peace, yet she found herself standing upon the edge of war. If Arianne truly plotted within Dorne's court, then the danger was twofold: Cersei's wrath from above and Dorne's own ambition from below. Darren entered quietly. "The girl is safe. The widow's servants keep watch at every door." "Good," Nymeria said. Then we must find a way to send word to Sunspear. The ravens are watched, Darren said. The Queen's spies hold the rookery, and her alchemists guard the flames that carry messages by smoke. Nymeria frowned. Then we will use the oldest messenger of all, Coin. She rose, moving to the window. Below, the city pulsed with life, the cries of traders, the clash of smiths' hammers, the clatter of wheels. Among that chaos, gold could buy silence, loyalty, even courage, but it could not buy time. By the second day, word reached them that the city was in uproar. The Queen had declared the Dornish envoy a traitor. Her proclamation named Nymeria Sand a conspirator in the attempted murder of Princess Myrcella Baratheon, an accusation so bold it reeked of desperation. She turns the knife toward us, Darren said grimly. She fears the truth, Nymeria replied, and she hides her own guilt behind our names. They could not linger. At dusk, they fled the city under the guise of merchants, their wagons filled with barrels of dried fruit and casks of sweet wine. Myrcella remained hidden beneath the false bottom of one such cart, wrapped in coarse cloth. The gold cloaks at the river gate demanded bribes, but Darren's tongue was smooth and his purse heavy. By nightfall, they were beyond the city walls, the scent of salt and freedom sharp in the air. They followed the King's Road south for 2 days, until the land began to soften, the air warmer, the trees thick with green. Myrcella grew restless, asking questions Nymeria could not answer. "Why would the Queen wish me dead?" the girl asked one night beside the campfire. "Because she fears you," Nymeria said, "and because she loves only herself." Myrcella stared into the flames. "Will I ever go home again?" Nymeria hesitated. "That depends on what you mean by home." The journey was long, and danger followed them like a shadow. Twice they were forced from the road by riders in Lannister red, and once they stumbled upon the charred remains of a caravan, its guards slain, its banners stripped. War was coming. Even the common folk could feel it. On the 6th night, as they camped beneath a stand of cypress, a rider approached from the south. His horse was lean, his cloak travel-stained, but the banner he carried was unmistakable, the sun and spear of Dorne. Nymeria's hand went to her blade as he reined in. "Who rides beneath the Martell banner?" The rider dismounted, pulling back his hood. A woman's face looked out, dark-eyed, fierce, her hair tangled by wind and travel. "Arianne," Nymeria breathed. Her cousin smiled faintly. "Did you think I would sit idle while my blood vanished into the lion's den?" They embraced, though tension lay between them like drawn steel. "You freed Tyane," Nymeria said. "Why?" Arianne's gaze hardened. "Because Dorne cannot remain divided. My father hides behind caution while our enemies sharpen their knives. Tyane understands what must be done." "And what is that?" "To bring Myrcella to Dorne," Arianne said. "To crown her queen in truth, not pretense. The realm will follow her claim. Tommen is weak. Cersei is despised. With Myrcella upon the throne, Dorne shall rise beside her." "You would make her a weapon," Nymeria said. "I would make her a queen," Arianne replied. "A queen of our making, one who will never forget who placed her there." Nymeria glanced toward the wagon where Myrcella slept. "She is a child, not a pawn." "We are all pawns," Arianne said softly. "Some of us simply learn to move faster." The cousins faced one another in silence, the firelight painting their faces in red and gold. At last, Nymeria spoke. "If this is your plan, then tell me, what place has Tyane in it?" Arianne's smile was small and cold. "She has gone to Sunspear. She will sway those who still doubt. Even my father cannot silence her forever." Nymeria felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Doran's patience and Arianne's ambition. Two forces now set upon collision, and she was caught between them. "Come south with me," Arianne said. "Help me bring Myrcella home. Help me finish what Oberyn began." Nymeria looked to the stars above, clear and cold. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "A blade without purpose cuts its wielder first." "I will go," she said at last, "but not for vengeance, for truth. If this ends in blood, it will not be mine." Arianne nodded, satisfied. "Then ride with me, cousin, for soon the sands will run red, and the lions will learn what it means to cross Dorne." The Sisters of the Sun set out together before dawn, their banners furled, their hearts set upon the desert. Behind them, King's Landing burned with unseen fires, and before them stretched the long, perilous road home, and in the silence between hoofbeats, Nymeria could almost hear the whisper of fate moving across the sands. The Game of Thrones had come to Dorne at last. The long road south was cruel. Dust rose from the horses' hooves in thick clouds, clinging to cloaks and hair alike, and the sun beat down with merciless strength. By day, the air shimmered. By night, the desert wind howled like a living thing. Yet still they rode, a small company bound together by silence and purpose. Nymeria Sand rode beside her cousin Arianne, her face hidden beneath a veil against the dust. Behind them came Sir Daron Corgil and two loyal spearmen of House Martell. The wagon bearing Princess Myrcella rattled at the rear, the girl cloaked and hooded, guarded as though she were a chest of gold rather than a child of royal blood. Each mile carried them farther from the reach of the Lannisters and deeper into the heat and emptiness of Dorne. To Myrcella, the land must have seemed strange, a country carved of sunlight and stone, beautiful and barren all at once. When the road rose high enough to see the mountains, she whispered softly, "It looks like fire sleeping." "It is fire," Arianne said, "and soon it shall wake." They camped that night beside the Will River, its slow waters glinting under the moon. The men slept early, exhausted, but the two women stayed awake. Arianne sat cross-legged beside the fire, sharpening a dagger upon a whetstone. Sparks jumped with each stroke. Nymeria watched her, the shadows deepening across her cousin's face. "You play a dangerous game," Nymeria said at last. "If the queen learns Myrcella yet lives, she will unleash every sword in the realm upon Dorne." Arianne smiled faintly. "Then let her try. Dorne has stood unbowed for 1,000 years. The lions will find their claws break upon our stones." Nymeria shook her head. "You speak as if war were a song to be sung. You forget the sound of it, the screams, the fire, the broken children. I have not." Arianne looked up sharply. "And what would you have me do? Sit idle as my father does, waiting for mercy from those who slaughtered our kin? No, cousin. The time for silence has passed. If Dorne is to live, it must strike first." "The last who struck first was our father," Nymeria said, "and he died with his head crushed beneath a monster's hand." The fire popped. Neither spoke for a long while. At length, Arianne said softly, "You loved him deeply." Nymeria's throat tightened. "He was the sun, and we were his shadows, and now he is gone." Arianne set aside her dagger. "Then help me finish what he began. Oberyn sought justice through trial. I will seek it through rule. With Myrcella crowned, Dorne will no longer be the forgotten child of the realm. We will stand beside the throne, or upon it." Nymeria looked into the flames and said nothing. Before dawn, they were riding again. The mountains loomed closer, jagged against the brightening sky. Word had spread ahead of them. Farmers pausing in their work to watch the company pass. Shepherds whispering that the sun's daughters rode again. At the pass of Skyreach, they were met by a small band of riders bearing the sigil of House Fowler, 2 hawks on silver. Their leader was Sir Ryan Fowler, a tall man with sharp eyes and a cautious smile. "My Lady Arianne," he greeted, bowing low. "We were told to expect you. My father awaits at the castle." "Then lead on," she said. Skyreach stood high upon a cliff, its towers white as bone, its walls looking down over the desert below. Lord Fowler received them in the hall, his manner courteous but wary. "So," he said, after hearing Arianne's tale, "you mean to crown the lion's cub with a Dornish crown. A bold dream." "A necessary one," Arianne said. "You have known the Martells since the first sun rose over Dorne, my lord. Will you stand with us now?" Lord Fowler studied her for a moment, then his gaze shifted to Myrcella, who stood beside Nymeria in silence. "She has her father's eyes," he said. "A boy's eyes in a girl's face. The realm may not accept her." "Then we shall make them," Arianne said. The lord leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming the armrest. "Doran will not approve." Arianne's smile was faint. "He will not stop me." Nymeria watched the exchange, unease coiling in her gut. Every word Arianne spoke drew her further from her uncle's shadow, and every promise brought them closer to ruin. Yet she saw the fire in her cousin's eyes, the same fierce certainty that had burned in Oberyn's. Lord Fowler gave a slow nod. "If you mean to do this, you will need allies. Ironwood, perhaps, Dane of Starfall, the Ullers of Hellholt." "They will answer," Arianne said. "Will they?" Nymeria murmured. "Or will they wait to see who bleeds first?" Arianne ignored her. "I will send riders to each. Within a fortnight, Dorne will know our cause." Later, when the others had gone to their chambers, Nymeria stood upon the castle's balcony, the wind tugging at her hair. The desert stretched vast and endless below, the stars burning fierce above it. Arianne joined her quietly. "You do not trust me," she said. "I trust your heart," Nymeria replied, "but not where it leads." Arianne laughed softly. "Then watch me, cousin. If I fall, you may say you warned me. I would rather keep you from falling at all." The next morning, the riders departed in all directions, carrying word of Arianne's intent. And as they rode, the realm began to stir. Lords whispered behind closed doors, the small folk spoke of rebellion, and in Sunspear, Prince Doran sat alone, reading reports brought by trembling messengers. By the 7th day, Arianne's banners were seen at Sandstone and Godsgrace, her name carried upon the desert wind. Myrcella rode beside her now, unveiled, her golden hair gleaming in the sun. She smiled shyly to those who knelt, though she scarcely understood the power being woven around her. At first, Nymeria thought perhaps it would work, that Dorne might rally behind this bright child and her fiery cousin. But then came the ravens. One from Ironwood, "We do not act without the prince's word." Another from Starfall, "We mourn Oberyn still. We do not seek new wars." And from Sunspear itself, a message written in Doran's careful hand. "Arianne, daughter of my heart, do not do this. Return at once. The game you play will break us all." Arianne read the letter in silence, her jaw tight. Then she tore it in two. "My father has had his turn," she said. "Now it is mine." That night, Nymeria dreamed of her father. She saw him in golden armor, his spear shining, his smile fierce and wild. "Beware the sand beneath your feet, my daughter," he said. "It shifts even as you stand upon it." When she woke, the world was silent. The moon hung low over the dunes, and the fire had burned to ash. She rose, uneasy, and stepped outside the tent. There, at the edge of camp, she saw movement. a shadow slipping between the horses. Steel glinted. "Who goes there?" she called. The shadow turned, and for a heartbeat, she thought it a stranger. Then the torchlight caught pale hair and calm blue eyes. "Tiene." "Sister," she breathed. Tiene's smile was soft, almost sad. "You ride the wrong path, Nym." "You freed yourself from my prince's chains," Nymeria said, gripping her dagger. "Now you come to bind us all?" "I come to end what must end," Tiene said. "Arianne's pride will doom us. Doran must be spared that shame." The sisters stared at one another, the silence between them heavy as stone. Then Tiene's hand moved toward her sleeve. Nymeria's blade flashed first. Steel met steel in the dark, and the night filled with the sound of breath and broken hearts. When it was over, Tian fled into the desert, vanishing into the dunes. Blood dripped from Nymeria's dagger, crimson as dawn. Arianne found her standing alone when the sun rose, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing," Nymeria said. "Only a shadow passing." But in her heart, she knew that Dorne itself had begun to bleed, and the sands would not soon drink their fill. Dawn crept over the dunes like a ghostly tide, turning the sand to rose and gold. The camp lay silent beneath its thin veil of mist, but Nymeria Sand did not sleep. She sat alone beside the dying fire, her cloak drawn tight against the chill, the hilt of her dagger warm in her hand. Tiene's blood had dried dark upon the blade. It seemed to whisper to her in the faintest hiss of the wind. "Sister, you cannot stop what is coming." When Arianne stirred from her tent, she found Nymeria staring east toward the rising sun. "You have not closed your eyes," she said softly. "There is no sleep for those who guard dreams," Nymeria replied. Arianne knelt beside her, her dark hair falling loose across her shoulders. "The men grow restless. They hear whispers of pursuit. My father's riders, perhaps, or worse, those loyal to the queen." "Then we must move before the storm finds us," Nymeria said. "Where is Myrcella?" "With the Maester," Arianne answered. "She is frightened, though she tries not to show it." "She should be frightened. We are playing with crowns and daggers alike." Arianne rose, her expression hardening. "Do not lose faith now, cousin. Every road worth walking is stained with peril. Soon we reach the green blood, and there we will meet the orphans. They will carry word ahead to Sunspear." Nymeria rose as well, her body weary, but her resolve unbroken. "Then let us ride." The company broke camp as the sun climbed higher, banners furled, hooves stirring trails of dust behind them. They rode in silence, each lost to their thoughts. The river came into view by midday, a ribbon of green life twisting through the endless tan of the desert. The Greenblood had always been a strange place, home to those who served no lord and swore to none. Their boats, shaped like leaves, drifted silently upon the current, and the orphans themselves watched from the banks, their faces painted in swirls of blue and white. When Arianne hailed them, an old man stepped forward from the shade of a palm, his beard silver, his eyes sharp as flint. "The daughters of the sun ride far from their home," he said. "The river hears many things. It hears that Dorne stirs once more." "It stirs for freedom," Arianne said. "And justice." The old man's smile was thin. "Justice is a heavy crown to wear." He led them to his barge, where they rested beneath woven awnings. The air was thick with the scent of oranges and river reeds. Myrcella sat quietly beside Nymeria, her hands folded in her lap. "Do they know who I am?" she whispered. "They know enough," Nymeria said. "They will hate me," the girl murmured, "for what my family has done." "Perhaps," Nymeria said gently, But hate is a seed that grows only when watered. Show them kindness, and you may find their hearts softer than stone." The princess nodded, though her eyes held the fear of a child who has seen too much. By nightfall, the campfires burned low along the riverbank. The orphans sang softly to the water, their voices weaving through the dark like threads of silver. Nymeria listened, feeling the song sink into her bones. It was a song of loss, of exile and endurance, of the river that never stopped flowing, no matter what fell into it. When the singing faded, Arianne approached her, her face lit by the dying fire. "A rider came from the south," she said. "He brings news from the Hellholt. The Ullers have risen. Their banners bear my name." Nymeria's stomach turned. Then war begins. Arianne's eyes burned with triumph. War was always the price. Does Doran know? By now he must. Let him send his ravens. Let him beg the lions for mercy. I will show him that Dorne still remembers how to bear its fangs. Nymeria stood slowly. "You will destroy him." "No," Arianne said. "I will save him. From himself." The words struck like stones. Nymeria turned away, her hands trembling. "I saw my sister last night," she said quietly. Arianne stiffened. "Tiena? She came to kill you." A long silence followed. "And? She failed," Nymeria said. "I do not know if she lives, but she will not stop." Arianne's jaw tightened. "Then let her come. I will not cower from my own blood." That night, sleep claimed Nymeria at last, but it brought no peace. She dreamed of Sunspear and flames, of her uncle's calm face watching from a balcony as fire consumed the water gardens. In her dream, Arianne stood at the center of it all, her crown melted to her brow, her eyes filled with sorrow. And from the smoke stepped Tiene, smiling as she whispered, "This is what you chose." Nymeria woke with a cry, her heart hammering. The camp was still. Only the river moved, its waters gleaming faintly under the moon. She rose, drawing her cloak around her shoulders, and walked to the edge of the bank. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of wet earth. From the shadows across the water came a voice. "You cannot protect them both." Nymeria froze. The figure that emerged was cloaked in gray, the hood drawn low. She could not see the face, but the voice was low and steady. A man's voice, familiar in some distant way. "Who are you?" she demanded. "An ally," the stranger said. "For now. The queen knows the girl lives. Cersei's ships have already sailed for Sunspear. She means to burn Dorne from the coast inward." Nymeria's blood ran cold. "How do you know this?" "I once served the crown," he said. "Now I serve only truth. Tell your prince, if he still draws breath, that the lioness comes with wildfire in her claws." Before she could speak again, the man stepped backward into the mist and was gone. By dawn, the camp was stirring. Arianne found Nymeria saddling her horse, her eyes grim. "What is it?" she asked. "War rides upon the sea," Nymeria said. "The queen comes for us." Arianne's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we will meet her, as Dorne has always met her enemies, with sun and steel." They rode hard that day, following the river until it met the foothills. The orphans faded behind them, their songs replaced by the rhythm of hooves and the hiss of wind through the grass. Ahead, the mountains rose, ancient and unyielding. By sunset, they reached the ridge overlooking the great valley of the water gardens. The towers of Sunspear gleamed far in the distance, their white stones glimmering beneath the blood-red sky. Home. For the first time since Oberyn's death, Nymeria felt the weight of it, the ache of love and loss, the pull of destiny that bound her to those walls. Yet as the wind shifted, she smelled smoke, faint but unmistakable. Arianne saw it too. "The lions are faster than I thought," she said softly. "No," Nymeria whispered. "They are already here." Below, along the distant shore, ships burned upon the tide, black sails and golden lions. The queen had come. Arianne drew her sword, the blade catching the last light of the dying sun. "Then let her learn what it means to taste Dornish fire." But Nymeria felt only dread. The game had gone too far, the blood too deep. And though the sands of Dorne had always swallowed its enemies whole, she knew now that this time, the desert would not be sated until it devoured its own. The storm had broken, and in its heart stood two daughters of the sun, one bound by vengeance, the other by duty, each carrying the fate of Dorne upon her blade. The wind that swept down from the mountains carried the scent of ash. Even from the high ridge where they stood, Nymeria Sand could see the black plumes rising from the coast, curling skyward like dark fingers clawing at the heavens. The Dornish sea burned. Arianne Martell's face was lit by the dying sun, her eyes reflecting the flames far below. "So it begins," she said softly, almost reverently. "The lions come roaring." Nymeria's hands tightened on the reins. "This is not war, cousin. This is slaughter." "Then let them find we are not sheep," Arianne replied, spurring her horse forward. They rode through the night, their company cutting swift across the desert trails. The stars above were pale and cold, the moon thin as a blade. The riders spoke little. Each could feel the weight of what awaited them beyond the hills. By dawn, they reached the outer dunes, where the scent of salt grew stronger, and the cries of gulls mingled with the crackle of distant flame. The first village they came upon was a ruin. Charred beams jutted from the sand like broken ribs, and smoke rose in lazy spirals from what had once been homes. The corpses of fishermen lay scattered near the shore, their nets tangled about them like shrouds. Myrcella covered her face, stifling a sob. "The queen did this?" she whispered. "She wears mercy as a mask," Nymeria said bitterly. "Behind it, only fire." Arianne dismounted, her boots sinking into the scorched sand. She knelt beside a body, a woman clutching a child in her arms, their faces turned toward the sea. "Remember this," she said to Myrcella, her voice low and fierce. "Remember it when the realm calls your mother noble." The girl said nothing. Her tears fell silently onto the ashes. From the north, a horn sounded, deep and distant. Nymeria turned sharply. "Ships," she said, "more than before." They climbed a low rise to see the harbor below. The waters burned with floating wrecks, yet beyond them came another fleet, larger, black sails glinting with gold. The Lannister lions borne by the wind. Arianne's face hardened. "We ride for Sunspear. Doran must be warned." Nymeria's heart twisted at the thought of her uncle, the quiet man who watched the sea while his people clamored for vengeance. "He knows," she said. "He must. But whether he will act, then we will act for him." The company rode hard, leaving the ruins behind. The dunes gave way to hard earth, and the first palms of the water gardens appeared on the horizon. But as they neared, Nymeria saw riders coming from the opposite direction. Dozens, their armor flashing red in the sun. "Lannisters?" Daron Corgyle asked, drawing his sword. "No," Nymeria said. "Dornish." The banners became clear, a sun and spear upon orange silk. The prince's guard. At their head rode Areo Hotah, the great axe resting across his saddle. His face was carved from stone. He reined in before them, his one good eye sweeping over the company. "My ladies," he said, "the prince commands that you halt." Arianne met his gaze. "You would bar my path, Hotah?" "I would follow my orders," he replied. "Then your orders are folly." Perhaps, but they are his. A tense silence followed. The desert wind sighed between them, carrying the hiss of the sea. Nymeria rode forward, her voice calm. "What has happened, Captain?" Hotah's expression did not change. The Queen's fleet struck at Planky Town. Her soldiers burned ships and took hostages, yet they did not land in full. They sent only fire and fear. Doran believes she means to provoke, not conquer. "She has already conquered the dead," Arianne said coldly. "And he would have us do nothing?" Hotah's jaw tightened. "He would have you safe. Sunspear is in uproar. The people cry for your blood, Arianne. They say you brought the war to their doors." Arianne's eyes flashed. "They should cry for Cersei's instead." Nymeria saw the pain flicker across Hotah's stern face. "The prince has commanded your return. Myrcella is to be taken into his care. No harm will come to her. She will not be locked away again," Arianne said. Hotah's gaze flicked to Nymeria. "Speak to her. You know his heart better than most." Nymeria dismounted, dust rising around her boots. "Cousin," she said softly, "come back with us. Let him hear your voice before the realm hears only rumor. If you defy him now, you will lose Dorne before the first sword is drawn." Arianne looked past her toward the distant sea, where smoke still stained the sky. "He fears too much," she whispered. "But I fear too little. Perhaps that is my sin." "Then let it be repentance, not ruin," Nymeria said. For a long moment, Arianne said nothing. Then she lowered her sword. "Very well. We ride to Sunspear." Hotah gave a curt nod, relief softening his features. The company turned toward the east, banners unfurled once more, though none cheered. By the time they reached the gates of Sunspear, the city seethed with unrest. Crowds filled the streets, shouting curses at the Lannisters, at the sea, and at the Martells themselves. Guards struggled to keep order, and above it all, the Dornish sun blazed mercilessly. Within the water gardens, the air was cooler, but no calmer. Doran Martell sat in his chair by the open arch, his gout-swollen feet propped upon a stool, his face drawn tight with fatigue. When Arianne entered, dragging the dust of war behind her, he raised his eyes. "Daughter," he said, his voice weary, "you have brought fire to my doorstep." "And you have done nothing to stop it," she replied. "Do you think I do nothing?" he asked quietly. "Every move I make is unseen, every step measured. I have written to allies who owe us blood, to houses that remember Oberyn's death. But war is not a game to be played in haste." Arianne's hands trembled. "You speak of patience while our people burn. And if I send them to war unready, they will burn twice as bright," Doran said. Nymeria watched as the two faced one another, the father and daughter, the patient stone and the raging flame. She saw herself reflected in both and felt the weight of her divided blood. At last, Doran's voice softened. "You have done what your heart demanded, Arianne. I cannot hate you for it. But now you will listen to mine, you and Nymeria both." He beckoned them closer. Upon the table before him lay a map, Westeros drawn in fine ink, its edges marked with symbols. "Look here," he said, pointing to the southern coast. "The Queen strikes to test us, but she will not come herself. She is too afraid. She sends her fire to see how we answer. And we shall answer, but not as she expects." Nymeria leaned closer. "What do you plan?" Doran's eyes gleamed faintly in the torchlight. "Vengeance," he said. "The kind that does not shout its name until the blade is already at the throat. While the Queen looks south, we shall send our eyes north, to the Reach, to King's Landing itself. The game continues." Arianne frowned. You would send spies when war burns at our feet? I would send serpents where lions sleep, Doran replied. He turned to Nymeria then, his expression unreadable. You have walked both paths, fire and patience. Now I need both. You will return to the capital, quietly. I would know who truly commands this war. Nymeria felt her heart sink. And Myrcella. She stays here, Doran said. Safe, for now. Arianne's mouth opened in protest, but Doran lifted a hand. Enough. The time for rashness is over. The sands shift again, my children, and Dorne must move with them. If we falter now, we are lost. Outside, thunder rumbled far over the sea. Nymeria turned her gaze to the horizon, where smoke met storm clouds, the two blurring until sky and flame were one. War had come to Dorne, but so had destiny. And as the first drops of rain struck the sun-baked earth, she knew that neither the Queen's fire nor her uncle's schemes would be enough to quench what had begun. The sands of vengeance were moving again, and soon, all of Westeros would feel them shift. The sea's breath lingered over Sunspear, heavy with smoke and salt. From the highest tower of the Water Gardens, Nymeria Sand watched the dawn rise, red and solemn as blood upon steel. Below, the courtyard stirred with the rustle of banners and the clatter of arms. The scent of oil and sweat filled the air. Dorne was waking to war, yet Prince Doran still moved as though within a dream. His commands came quiet as rain, his couriers slipping through shadowed gates at dusk. Letters bound in red wax left the city each night, borne by swift riders across the deserts and up the Prince's Pass. Nymeria knew not what all of them carried, but she understood enough. Doran Martell's patience was over. He had chosen his board. Now the pieces moved. Nymeria descended the tower stairs, her steps quick, her thoughts quicker. Arianne awaited her below, armed and dressed in deep orange silk, the sun and spear brooch pinned high upon her breast. The fire had not left her eyes, though it had been tempered, honed sharp as glass by her father's quiet hand. You mean to obey him, Nymeria said. Arianne gave a faint smile. He means to let me believe that. But you know my father's game. He yields to guide. And if he guides us toward ruin, then we make a new road. They passed through the halls, where servants whispered and guards stiffened as they approached. The Water Gardens, once a place of laughter, had grown tense and watchful. The children still played in the pools, but even their songs sounded wary, like birds before a storm. Outside the prince's solar, Areohota stood with his axe resting beside him. The Norvoshi bowed his head slightly. He awaits you both. Within, Doran sat at his desk, the morning light slanting across maps and scrolls. His face was pale but composed, his eyes as calm as the stillest sea. My daughters, he said softly. We are not both your daughters, Arianne said, but her tone lacked venom. In my heart you are, Doran replied. Blood of my blood, by love if not by birth. He turned his gaze to Nymeria. You know the task I have given you? I am to return to King's Landing, she said. Yes, you will carry the guise of peace once more. Tell them Dorne seeks truce, that the fires upon the coast were the acts of outlaws and pirates. Let the Queen believe our strength spent upon ourselves, but your eyes will see what her tongue conceals. Nymeria's hands tightened. And if I find truth she does not wish known, then you send word, and I will act. Quiet vengeance, Nym. That is our way. Arianne paced before the table, her steps restless. And what of me? Shall I sit idle while my cousin risks her life among the lions? You will rule in my stead, Doran said. Sunspear must be united, and my name alone will not keep the peace. You have the fire our people love. Use it. Keep the lords loyal, and the small folk calm. The realm watches us now. Ariane's eyes softened for a moment. Father, you trust me still. I must, he said. You are my heir. When they left him, the air felt heavy. Doran's will was like the tide, slow, inevitable, impossible to fight. As they crossed the courtyard, Ariane caught Nymeria's arm. Be wary, cousin, she said. The Queen's court devours the bold and the cautious alike. If you must spill blood, make it quick and unseen. Nymeria met her gaze. And if I fall, then Dorne will mourn you and avenge you. By sunset, preparations were complete. Nymeria took 20 riders and a single ship, a sleek galley named the Serpent's Kiss. Its black sails caught the evening wind, carrying them northward along the coast. The sea glittered beneath the fading sun, and the cries of gulls trailed after them like ghosts. For days they sailed, skirting the smoking ruins of Planky Town, where the wreckage of the Queen's attack still floated in the shallows. Here and there, survivors hailed them from the shore, but Nymeria could offer no aid. She had a prince's command to keep and a realm's future upon her shoulders. On the fourth night, as the moon rose pale above the waves, a storm found them. It began with a whisper of wind, then a roar. Lightning flared across the sky, and the mast groaned like a wounded beast. Nymeria clung to the rail, the spray stinging her face. The crew shouted prayers to Mother Royne, to Ruller, to any god who might hear. When the storm passed, half the sails were torn and one of the masts split clean through. The sea had swallowed 2 men. Nymeria stood upon the deck, soaked and shivering, yet alive. Dorne's daughters do not drown so easily, said Ser Daren beside her, offering a flask. She drank, the wine burning warmth through her throat. King's Landing appeared on the 7th morning, rising from the mist like a scar upon the sea. The walls gleamed wet, the Red Keep's towers jagged against the gray sky. Nymeria's jaw tightened. Back to the lion's den, she thought. At the harbor, gold cloaks awaited, their armor tarnished, their faces grim. She was escorted through streets choked with filth and fear. The city felt different now, its people hollow-eyed, its air heavy with the stench of unrest. She saw hunger in every alley, the faint madness that follows when hope is gone. The Queen received her that afternoon in the throne room. Cersei Lannister wore mourning black, though there was no grief in her expression. So, she said, her voice smooth as poisoned honey, the desert sends another snake. Nymeria bowed low. Dorne sends its loyalty, your grace. Cersei laughed softly. How sweet. Shall I kiss this loyalty or crush it beneath my heel? I would advise neither, my queen, Nymeria said. The Martells remember both kindness and cruelty. For a heartbeat, silence filled the hall. Then the queen smiled thinly. You have your father's tongue, I see. Nymeria inclined her head. And his patience. The exchange ended in brittle courtesy. Yet as Nymeria was led to her chambers, she could feel the eyes that followed her, men who served the queen, and others who served darker masters. That night, she sat alone beside the hearth, the flames low. A single parchment lay upon the table before her, sealed in red wax, the first of many she would write in cipher for Doran's eyes alone. The lions grow lean, she wrote. The crown rots from within. The queen drinks and rages, her council divided. The faith stirs in the streets. Something foul festers here, and it will burst soon. When it does, the blood will flow north and south alike. She paused, listening to the wind beyond the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled, slow, mournful. Nymeria Sand dipped her quill again. Tell Arianne the sea burns still. Tell her that the storm is not done. The game is not over. It has only changed its board. She sealed the letter, then leaned back, her eyes fixed upon the dancing light. Outside, King's Landing slept uneasily beneath its towers, unaware that a serpent had come once more among its stones, and that the sands of Dorne were not yet still. The night held its breath, and in that silence, Nymeria smiled. The nights in King's Landing were never truly dark. The city glimmered like a dying ember, its streets lit by lanterns that swung upon crooked poles, its alleys alive with whispers and laughter too soft to be kind. Nymeria Sand had grown used to the noise, but not to the stench, the rot of the river mixed with smoke and the sweat of too many bodies packed behind too few walls. She had been in the capital a fortnight, lodged in chambers within the Red Keep that were fine enough, yet felt more prison than haven. Each day she played her part, the smiling envoy of Dorne, graceful and deferent, weaving words like silk before the queen and her council. Each night she shed her mask, and the true work began. The first letters had already gone south by secret hands, carried by sailors sworn to coin and silence. Reports of the court's fractures, the murmurs of rebellion, the growing unrest of the faith. All these she sent to Dorne Martell, yet there was something darker stirring beneath the surface, something even the queen's guards dared not speak of. On the 15th night, her chance came. She dined in the small hall with Lord Qyburn, a pale man with eyes that gleamed like polished bone. He was polite, almost tender in his manner, yet every word from his mouth seemed to crawl like a spider. His grace, young King Tommen, grows stronger by the day, he said between sips of wine. A gentle soul, though the weight of the realm lies heavy on such small shoulders. And the queen? Nymeria asked. Qyburn's smile thinned. She bears her burden with spirit, but even the fiercest lioness tires when surrounded by wolves. Nymeria leaned closer. What wolves do you mean? The faith, my lady. The new High Septon gathers strength daily. His sparrows swarm the streets, preaching against sin and gold alike. Even the queen must bow to their chants, or risk being trampled. He paused, studying her. You have the look of one who does not fear serpents or saints. Perhaps Dorne breeds stronger hearts than the rest of us. Or more careful ones, she said. When the meal ended, Qyburn excused himself with a bow, leaving her alone. But he had given her what she needed, a path. That night, veiled and cloaked, Nymeria slipped from her chambers and took to the streets. The guards at the gate knew her face, yet not her purpose, and she passed without question. The moon hung low over the city, pale and swollen. She followed the sound of chanting through the narrow alleys until she reached the great sept of Baelor. Its white spires loomed ghostly in the moonlight, the steps below thronged with barefoot men and women clutching torches. Their voices rose and fell in fervent rhythm. Bare the feet, break the crown. Bare the feet, break the crown. The sight sent a chill through her. Here, beneath the statue of the warrior, faith had become fire. A man in rough robes noticed her watching. Sister, will you walk with us? He asked. His face was lined and kind, yet his eyes burned with the fever of the converted. I walk my own road, Nymeria said. Then may it lead you to the Seven, he murmured, turning back to the crowd. She lingered only long enough to see what she had come to see, the faith's power swelling like a tide. Then she slipped away, deeper into the city's heart. In Flea Bottom, she found a tavern where sailors drank in corners and whores whispered secrets between sips of ale. A familiar face waited in the shadow of the hearth. Darren Corgyle, his cloak travel-stained, his expression grim. My lady, he said when she joined him. Your letters reached Sunspear. The prince bids you continue. But there is more." He handed her a folded parchment, sealed with red wax. She broke it carefully. "The Queen's fires are but a veil. The true enemy moves unseen. Seek the spider's web. Within it, truth hides." "Varys," Nymeria murmured. "The eunuch." Darren nodded. "Some say he fled the city after Lord Tywin's death. Others claim he still walks these halls in shadow." "Then I will find his shadow," she said. Over the following days, Nymeria moved through the Red Keep like smoke. She spoke with the scullions and guards, the washerwomen and scribes, listening for the faintest hint of the spider's thread. Each night she returned to her chamber, piecing together fragments: a whisper of tunnels beneath the castle, a rumor of ravens trained to fly at midnight, a servant who swore she'd seen a bald man vanish behind a tapestry. On the 6th night, she found it. The tapestry hung near the old rookery, faded and forgotten. When she pressed her hand against the wall behind it, the stone shifted, revealing a narrow stair spiraling into darkness. Torch in hand, she descended. The air below was cool and thick with dust. The passage twisted like a serpent, leading her deeper into the keep's belly. At last it opened into a chamber lined with cages, hundreds of them, filled with ravens whose black eyes gleamed in the torchlight. And in the center stood a man. He was dressed in plain gray, his head smooth as an egg, his smile calm and knowing. "Lady Nymeria of Dorne," he said. "I wondered when you would find me." "Varys," she breathed. "The same." He inclined his head. "Your father had a tongue as sharp as your own. I mourned him more than most in this city. Then help me avenge him." Varys chuckled softly. "Vengeance is a poor meal, my lady. I deal in survival and secrets." "Then give me one worth hearing." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "The Queen's war is a farce. She has no wish to conquer Dorne. Her true enemy sits not in Sunspear, but in her own hall. The faith grows bold, the Tyrells plot behind her back, and her council crumbles. But while she fights her ghosts, others move pieces she cannot see." "Who?" "The dragons," he said simply. Nymeria stared. "The Targaryens are dead. Not all of them." He smiled faintly. "Across the narrow sea, a queen rises in fire. Here, her allies gather coin and counsel. The storm you fear from Cersei is but the wind before the flame." Nymeria's pulse quickened. "And Dorne?" "Dorne will be asked to choose," he said. "Sooner than you think." She studied him in the dim light, the weight of his words settling upon her like dust. "Why tell me this?" "Because," Varys said, "your prince is patient, and patience will be needed before long. The realm will burn, and when it does, those who move too soon will perish. Tell Doran Martell, the game shifts again. The lions snarl, but the dragons stir." Then he turned, vanishing down another passage as quietly as smoke. Nymeria stood for a long moment, the torch guttering in her hand. Above her, she could almost hear the faint creak of the Iron Throne, and beyond it, the restless murmurs of a city waiting to devour itself. When she returned to her chamber, she began to write once more. "The spider still weaves, uncle, and his web stretches farther than even your eyes can see. The Queen's fury is not the storm we feared. It is only the spark. The fire comes from across the sea, carried on dragon wings." She sealed the letter and held it to the flame until the wax dripped like blood. Outside, thunder rolled over the bay. King's Landing slept, but Nymeria Sand did not. For the first time since she had set foot upon its stones, she felt the pulse of destiny quicken beneath her feet, the tremor before the fall. The game had changed once more, and somewhere far to the east, fire stirred in the darkness, waiting to claim them all. The storm that broke over King's Landing came without warning. Rain hammered against the Red Keep's crimson towers, Wind howled through its courtyards, and the sea flung its fury against the cliffs below. Yet within those walls, it was not the tempest outside that set hearts trembling, but the one gathering within. Nymeria Sand had not slept. Since her meeting with Varys, her nights had been filled with the scratching of quills, the burning of wax, and the whisper of ravens' wings leaving the rookery under moonlight. Her words flew south to Sunspear, carrying tidings of dragons, spies, and the cracks widening in the Queen's reign. But still, no answer came. The silence weighed upon her like a curse. In the mornings, she walked among the courtiers, smiling with the calm of a woman untouched by fear. The Dornish envoy, they called her, exotic, cunning, dangerous. Men spoke of her in the same breath as her father, the Red Viper. She let them speak. Fear was a weapon, and she had learned how to wield it as deftly as any blade. One morning, while the storm still raged, a summons came. The Queen required her presence at once. Cersei Lannister received her in the solar behind the Iron Throne, a room filled with the scent of myrrh and wine. The Queen's hair was bound in gold, her gown black as mourning cloth, her smile thin as a knife's edge. "So, the desert flower blooms still," she said. "Tell me, Lady Nymeria, what keeps you in my city? Surely you tire of its filth." "Your Grace's hospitality keeps me here," Nymeria said, bowing her head. "Dorne seeks peace, and peace requires patience." Peace. Cersei's tone turned brittle. A word my brother once loved, and we all saw where that led him. She rose, pacing before the window where lightning flared. "I have received troubling reports. They say your prince gathers swords in secret, that he speaks of vengeance still." "My uncle gathers only the patience of Dorne," Nymeria replied. "We have lost too much to chase vengeance blind." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "You speak prettily, but I see through silk and smiles. If your prince plots against the crown, I will know." "You may try," Nymeria said softly. Cersei's lips curved, though her eyes stayed cold. "You remind me of your father. He too thought he could dance around lions. We taught him otherwise." Nymeria's hands itched for the dagger at her side. Instead, she inclined her head. "Then may his lesson not be wasted, Your Grace." When she left the chamber, her heart was a storm of its own. The Queen's words were no idle threat. Cersei meant to move against Dorne. Nymeria could feel it in the air, sharp as the scent of lightning before it strikes. That night, she went again to the tunnels beneath the keep, to the place where the spider had first found her. The ravens stirred as she entered, black feathers gleaming like oil. But Varys was gone. In his place waited a girl no older than 12, pale and thin, her hair cropped short. She held a sealed parchment in trembling hands. "He said you would come," the child whispered. "He said to give you this." Nymeria took the letter. The wax bore no seal, but the script within was unmistakable. "The Queen moves against your kin. Even now, riders leave for Sunspear with fire in their saddlebags. But fire burns both ways. Tell your prince, the dragons draw nearer. The time for waiting ends." Nymeria read it twice, her jaw tightening. The girl lingered, eyes wide. "He said to tell you one more thing. He said, the snake and the dragon will share a crown, or choke upon it together." Before Nymeria could speak, the child fled into the tunnels, swallowed by the dark. When she returned to her chamber, she found Ser Darren waiting, his cloak damp with rain. "My lady," he said urgently, "the Queen's men search the docks. They speak of treason and Dornish spies. We must leave before dawn." Nymeria crossed to the window. The storm had begun to break, the rain thinning. though thunder still rumbled beyond the bay. Where would we run? To the narrow sea, to the east. We could find the dragons before the lions do. She turned to face him. You have heard, then. Half the city whispers of it, he said. A queen reborn, with 3 beasts of flame. They say her ships have left Meereen, bound for Westeros. Nymeria's thoughts raced. Dorne had long memories, and the Martells had once bled for House Targaryen. Perhaps destiny, long delayed, turned its gaze south once more. If it is true, she said, then the game changes beyond even Doran's reach. That night, she could not rest. She paced the chamber until the candles burned low, her mind torn between duty and impulse. To stay was to watch the queen's wrath fall upon her kin. To flee east was to gamble Dorne's future upon a whisper of dragons. When dawn broke pale and quiet, her decision was made. She went to the harbor cloaked and veiled, Ser Darren beside her. The city was still half asleep, its streets glistening from the rain. The air smelled of brine and smoke. At the docks, she found what she sought, a Braavosi merchant vessel preparing to sail on the tide. I need passage east, she told the captain. No questions. The man hesitated, glancing at Darren's sword. Braavos asks many questions, my lady. Then Dorne will pay for your silence. She drew a purse from her belt and tossed it into his hands. The weight of gold ended his doubts. They boarded at once. By the time the first rays of sun struck the masts, the ship was already gliding from the harbor, its sails pale against the brightening sky. Nymeria stood at the stern, watching King's Landing shrink behind them. The Red Keep's towers glowed in the dawn like spears of blood. Somewhere within those walls, the queen plotted her vengeance. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another queen raised hers. For a long time, Nymeria said nothing. The wind caught her hair, lifting it like a banner. The sea ahead stretched endless and blue, its promise uncertain. At last, she spoke to Darren. If dragons truly fly again, then every crown in Westeros will tremble. And what of Dorne? He asked. She smiled faintly. Dorne has waited for the sun to rise. Perhaps now it will burn. Behind them, thunder rolled one final time over the bay, echoing like a warning across the waves. Before them, the horizon glimmered, vast and bright and dangerous. The serpent had left the desert for the sea, and the world would soon feel her bite. And far away, beyond the narrow waters, 3 shadows crossed the sun. The voyage east was long and cruel. The Braavosi ship, maiden of mist, cut through gray seas and heavy wind, her sails swollen with storms. For weeks, the world was water, heaving, endless, alive with salt and rage. Nymeria Sand stood often at the prow, her cloak whipping around her like a banner of flame, watching waves break against the hull as though the ocean itself sought to drag her beneath. At night, she dreamt of Dorne, the red mountains, the scent of dust and lemon, her father's laughter echoing through the water gardens. But always, the dream turned dark, and she would see his body as it had been described to her, shattered, still, the sand beneath him soaked red. Then she would wake to the creak of timber and the hiss of wind in the rigging, her hand already reaching for her dagger. Ser Darren watched her with quiet concern. You sleep less with every passing night, he said once. Sleep dulls the blade, she replied. You are not a blade. Nymeria looked at him, her eyes unreadable. I was forged as one. The sea grew warmer as they sailed farther south, the air thick with heat and the cry of gulls. By the 4th week, dark shapes appeared upon the horizon. Ships, black-hulled and dragon-prowed, their sails red as fire. The Braavosi captain paled. Slavers, he hissed, or worse. But Nymeria felt something stir in her blood, a shiver like a whisper of destiny. "No," she said, "these are not slavers." As they drew nearer, she saw the sigil that snapped in the wind above the largest ship, a three-headed dragon, crimson on black. "Daenerys Targaryen," she breathed. Daeron's hand went to his sword. "Then the tales are true." "They are." Nymeria's voice was low, reverent. "The dragons have come." The Maiden of Mist was hailed and boarded by armed men speaking in the harsh, rolling tongue of Essos. They wore no sigils of Lannister or Tyrell, no colors of Westeros, only the marks of dragons stitched in red upon their leather. At their head stood a tall man with sun-browned skin and hair white as frost. "I am Sir Jorah Mormont," he said. "You sail close to the fleet of Queen Daenerys Stormborn. State your purpose." Nymeria stepped forward. "I am Nymeria Sand of Dorne. I come not as foe, but as ally. Tell your queen the desert's daughter seeks her audience." Mormont studied her a long moment before nodding. "Then you shall have it." By nightfall, Nymeria stood upon the deck of the great flagship, Silverwing, the sea whispering below. The scent of smoke and salt mingled in the air, but above all was the faint, strange smell of something older, ash and scales. When Daenerys Targaryen emerged from her cabin, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. She was younger than Nymeria had imagined, but her eyes burned with a calm fire. Her hair was pale silver, her gown plain white linen, yet the very air around her seemed alive with unseen flame. Behind her, upon the mast, shadows moved, vast wings folding in the dusk. "You are far from home, Lady Sand," Daenerys said. Her voice was soft, but carried the weight of command. "Home burns, Your Grace," Nymeria replied. "The lions of the west set fire to our shores. The snakes of the south bleed each other in sand. I came seeking a queen who could end it. And you think that queen is me?" "I know it." Daenerys regarded her in silence, her gaze measuring. "Many have sought me with pretty words and bleeding hearts. What makes you different?" Nymeria met her eyes. "Because I have seen the game for what it is. In King's Landing, they fight for ashes and pride. In Dorne, we waited for vengeance so long we forgot its cost. But you fight for fire. You fight to make a new world." Something flickered in the Dragon Queen's eyes, something between curiosity and sorrow. "And what does Dorne offer me in this new world?" "Our allegiance," Nymeria said. "Our ships, our spears, the blood of the Red Viper who died fighting your father's killers." Daenerys turned her gaze to the sea. "I have heard of your uncle. He was brave and proud. Pride killed many in my family. Then let it be replaced with purpose," Nymeria said. A long silence followed. The only sound was the wind in the rigging and the distant guttural growl that rose from below decks, the dragons stirring in their hold. At last, Daenerys spoke. "You will come to Meereen with me. There we shall speak of Dorne's future, and mine." Nymeria bowed her head. "As you command." The days that followed blurred into one another. The fleet turned east, the ships gliding over calm waters as if guided by fate itself. Daenerys's followers, unsullied freedmen Dothraki, moved among the decks like shadows of another world. Nymeria watched them, fascinated and wary. These were not the soldiers of Westeros. They did not fight for gold or glory, but for the will of their queen. Once, she stood upon the upper deck and saw the dragons in flight for the first time. 3 shapes circled high above the fleet, wings beating slow and thunderous. Their cries echoed across the waves, ancient and terrible, filling her chest with a strange, trembling awe. "They are beautiful," she whispered. Beautiful things are often deadly, said Darren beside her. Then perhaps they belong to me, she said, smiling faintly. When they reached the shores of Meereen, the city blazed under the sun, golden domes, white walls, and banners of the Dragon Queen fluttering above it. The fleet anchored in the bay, and Daenerys went ashore with her retinue. Nymeria walked at her side, sand still clinging to her boots from a faraway desert. That night, a great feast was held in the palace of the pyramids. Music filled the air, strange and sweet, and torches painted the walls with dancing light. Daenerys sat upon a low dais, her dragons coiled in the shadows above her, their eyes burning like twin suns. When the time came, Nymeria knelt before her. "Your Grace," she said, "Dorne stands at a crossroad. The lions close their jaws around us, the wolves fight among themselves, and the stags are ghosts. But we remember still the fire that once ruled the realm. If it burns again, we would have it burn with us, not against us." Daenerys regarded her, then rose slowly. "You would have me trust a viper. You would have me follow a dragon," Nymeria answered. "Perhaps we are not so different." A smile ghosted across the queen's lips. "Perhaps not." She extended her hand. Nymeria took it, feeling the strange heat of it, as if flame lived beneath the skin. "In fire and blood, then," Daenerys said. "In sun and spear," Nymeria replied. And in that moment, the pact was sealed, not with banners or ravens, but with a meeting of eyes and the silent promise of war. Far across the sea, the Iron Throne waited, cold and sharp as ever. But the wind that rose that night carried the scent of both desert and dragonfire. Two queens had begun their dance, though neither yet knew who would bow and who would burn. And in the shadow of Meereen's walls, as the dragons lifted their heads toward the stars, Nymeria Sand looked east and whispered to the dark, "Father, the game you began is not yet ended." The dragons roared in answer, and their fire lit the night.